Greetings and salutations, and welcome to Ref the District. I'm Nathan Perry, and joining me today, as always, we got Stoner and Trev here. I'm not a part of the Backwards Hat Club, and I greatly apologize for that. But I am rocking not a goatee. Maybe that's what I should do. Is I should get the Dan Quinn goatee here on episode 159. We've got the whole new experience, a new era here in Washington, as they've hired Dan Quinn since our last episode, full episode. They've hired Dan Quinn, they've hired Kliff Kingsbury and Whitt Jr. And now we've got to talk about what's next. That's going to be in the cool down. We're going to be going over Kliff Kingsbury and Whitt Jr. in the game. And we're going to talk Dan Quinn here in the warm-up. Spoiler alert, Caleb Williams talk going to happen in the cool down. And during the coordinator talk, at least one of us doesn't like Kliff Kingsbury. So all of that is your spoiler. Let's get into it with Dan Quinn here. Trev, you and I, not on board for the hire, right? This was not the hire that we were looking for. We've had some time to digest it, though. Yep. He's had his press conference. A lot of people starting to kind of come on board after the press conference. Are you one of them?
I am. I kind of compare it to, well, first of all, I want to make this announcement. I'm bringing something back to the show that's been missing for quite a while, and it's Fresca. I got it back, guys. Fresca is back. Nah, but to Dan Quinn, I'm kind of comparing it to like food. You know, you heard about it, you've seen other people taste it. Some liked it, some didn't. So now you get a serving of it. You taste it. You're like, I don't know. Let me go eat something else and come back to it. And you come back to it, you're like, it's actually starting to taste pretty good. That's what it is with Dan Quinn with me. I was not sold before the press conference. Just like EB, I was kind of sold, but once I heard the press conference, I was on board. But for this one, I was not on board. The track record from Atlanta, the 28-3 Super Bowl, coming from Dallas. We don't want Dallas, another trash, another man's treasure in this case. But that press conference, man, it felt real. It felt authentic. It didn't feel like he was saying the right things just to be saying the right things because he got the job. It didn't seem like he sounded like he was really passionate about being in Washington after realizing the markers that were on his checklist to be a head coach again. We provided that. So he was like, I want to be there. And that's really good to hear coming from a head coaching candidate. I'm not sure if Ron said it or a previous one say like they want to be here, but like if they did, it didn't sound as authentic as Dan Quinn. So I'm on board. You've heard nothing but great things, and it's good because the things you hear are like football related. It's not like when you heard Ron Rivera, leader of men, quote unquote, discipline, great guy, da 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 da. But for Dan Quinn, it's like he brings the best out of his players. All the positive things you've heard about are about football, and that's what we need in this organization. We don't need a nice guy to come in and just have a job. We need a football guy to come in and do the football job. And I believe Dan Quinn after that press conference is the guy to do that.
Well, we have Brian looking in on Stoner's health here. Stoner's got the stogie. He's got the backwards hat going. And Brian wants to know, has Stoner fixed the wall he ran through during the press conference yet? Stoner, is that wall fixed yet? Did you patch it up?
No. I'm going to leave it as a reminder of everything that he did in that press conference. I'm sure it's all talk, right? The press conference was great, but I thought we were going to start off with we're going to start like a movement, like a hashtag, like Stoner was right. Can we start that hashtag that Stoner was? That's why I'm smoking the cigar over here. It's a victory cigar for trying to. Now I didn't get the name right, but I got the style of what I think that this team should do.
CEO coach, that was a big one.
CEO
you nailed that.
A leader type guy, someone with the experience, and that's what they ended up doing. And I'm super excited about Dan Quinn. He wasn't on my top 3 list. Mine was Harbaugh, Vrabel, and Raheem Morris. But he's the same type of guy.
Sure,
a guy who's going to come in and what I think is kind of funny, and I'm just kind of goofing around with the whole Stoner was right deal, but I think it's funny how the NFL is shifting again in terms of its coaches. They went through this phase of hiring when Sean McVay got the job and he ended up going to a Super Bowl and then eventually winning a Super Bowl. that started this whole thing about we have to hire the 35-year-old offensive coordinator, boy genius, analytics guru, go for it all the time on fourth down. And that's what they ended up doing. But it failed so many times. It's done well in some places, Sean McVay, of course, but it's failed so many times. Now they're going back to, you know what? I want my coach to coach the team. And then I want my offensive coordinator to coach the offense. And I want my defensive coordinator to coach the defense. And that's what you get with a Dan Quinn.
He said as much. He's not going to call the defense. He's leaving that to Whitt. And he just wants to take care of the things, the in-game situation things.
Right.
He wants to focus on that. But Stoner, it didn't really work with the previous guy.
You're
and
right.
I think that's why we wanted to go
Doesn't mean
back
it
to
can't work.
that younger. You're right. I will say Gus Bus was just like, hey, we wanted McDonald. Let's face it. The team seemed to like McDonald. They wanted to call that. There's reports that maybe they even offered him something, that they contacted him on his way to Seattle, and he took the Seattle job. Some people have reported that it could have been, we offered him 3 years. He wanted the longer contract. But the point I think was for McDonald was once he was headed to Seattle, that was a done deal.
Yeah.
We weren't winning that battle anymore.
Right. He wanted Seattle more than he wanted Washington.
And I don't think I honestly don't necessarily believe a lot of that. I don't necessarily believe all the team raw stuff that we're hearing as well, where Quinn was their first choice and all this other stuff and whatnot. They were very thorough with their process. That part we can agree with. They definitely were not rapid, and some names might have been kind of taken away from them. We heard some about Raheem Morris, might have been a guy that they liked, but Atlanta was willing to offer him a contract prior to McDonald and Johnson becoming available. And so Washington was like, no, we're going to stick with the process.
Right.
That was Albert Breer on Monday Morning Quarterback, who kind of led us into that kind of information here. I do think they landed a guy that they wanted, though. Make no mistake about that. Quinn might not have been the first choice. Okay. There might have been some others there, but Quinn absolutely was a guy I think was higher on their list than any one of ours. And all you have to do is go back to Adam Peters' comments about what they were looking for. They were like, we want a leader. We want this. They told us from the get-go what they're looking for. And we chose to ignore that and go with the new convention of, like you said, the younger, the hot ticket. People really ran wild with the Ben Johnson thing. Now I think we're going in the opposite direction where people are really tearing down Ben Johnson, which I don't think is fair to him. I don't agree with how he pulled his name out of the hat and the reports of like the text message and everything, but I think people maybe need to back off a little bit there. But we got Dan Quinn, and I've seen the sentiment. Locked on Law, I think, put it out there, right? Where it's just like, I'm with Dan Quinn because I have no other choice. And I'm a little bit of that, but I also don't agree with the sense that you don't have to rock with Quinn because we don't have a choice. You can choose not to rock with him and not like what he brings. But we're still in the stage of optimism right now, right? Because the season hasn't started. We're 17-0 until we find out otherwise.
Yeah. And
Dan Quinn has experience leading a team. He's done something that Washington hasn't done for 3 decades. He has an 11-win season.
That's
under his belt. And I said that he's not led a defense that I really think has been one of the greats. And you all were trying to tell me Seattle. And I didn't really give him credit for that. I mean, he did have the Legion of Boom, and that's probably got a couple, 2 or 3 different Hall of Famers on it. So I'm not going to necessarily give him all of his credit. But when you actually break down the statistics of what he did in Atlanta, he really did have solid defenses. He has solid defenses in Dallas where they were bottom of the league, and he brought them up to being a top 10, top 5 unit.
Solid is not giving him enough credit, Nathan. These were, by all metrics, all analytics, your basic stats and your analytical stats, top 5 defense, 2021, 2022, 2023. Now they couldn't come up big in the playoffs, and this year they weren't good against the best teams, but they were fantastic defenses. He did a good job with them. He did a great job with the Dallas defense. He did a great job with the Seattle defense. He did not do a great job those last couple of years in Atlanta with that defense. But one of the best things that he said in that press conference and was reported and talked about is that after that Atlanta job, instead of just being all big-headed and having this ego and saying, when I get my next chance, I'm going to prove everybody wrong. And no, he did they call it a
360 review. Yeah.
Right. So it's going to look
called
at
up Logan Paulson.
Yeah, he's going to he looked at everything good and everything bad that he did. And he's going to learn from it, and he's going to change some things. And he's not going to be so stubborn with his offense that worked for a little while. And then when it stopped working, he was too stubborn and he just kept with it. He's not going to do that anymore. He's not going to call the plays anymore because he wants to focus more on the management of a game. That's unheard of, really, to have a coach say that they had an basically outside influence of people looking at what you did and then you taking that and learning from it and say, the next time I get my chance, I'm going to make some changes and I'm going to do better. And I think that's a huge advantage to why you got to like this hire of Dan Quinn. And I've loved it from the beginning. I thought it was a great hire, especially the style. You guys killed me when I said I want a Ron Rivera type style coach. And you were like,
I mean, you really let off with the wrong foot there.
Well, it was for a little bit of shock value just to get your attention. But that's exactly what I thought this team needed was that style of coach, was a Ron Rivera type coach, not Ron Rivera's results, but the whole thing about being a CEO type coach. But there's so many great qualities, Nathan, that he has. The guys he's coached under. Think of all the different guys that he's coached under that we looked at. Pete Carroll, Super Bowl champion and college champion. Dennis Erickson, college champion. Steve Mariucci, did he win a Super Bowl as head coach in San Fran? I can't remember.
Coordinator. No.
Maybe as a coordinator. Mike McCarthy, Super Bowl champion. Jim Mora, we got to the Super Bowl. I don't think he won a Super Bowl. Nick Saban, 6-time NCAA champion. These are the guys he's worked for. And then think about the staffs that he's put together with the likes of Kyle Shanahan, Matt LaFleur, Mike McDaniel, guys like that. Raheem Morris was his defensive coordinator for a little bit in Atlanta. This is a guy who has worked for the right people and has learned, and a guy who has who has figured out how to put together a great staff.
He has. That is absolutely. I said it. That was my positive when trashing him last week. I said I'm trying to look for something positive.
Yeah.
In a if Washington were get Dan Quinn, because we didn't have a candidate when we were doing this last Wednesday. Dan Quinn was number 1 on the list at that point, and it was just I was trying to find something good, and I said he could hire good staff, and we're going to talk about that staff in the game. So I'm not going to want to get there. But I mentioned the Legion Boom thing, Grimjaw here. I don't necessarily like, he does get credit for that defense in Seattle. What I was pointing out was that defense happened to have players of a caliber that even Joe Barry could probably put together a solid defense. Jack Del Rio, the 2024 Jack Del Rio, couldn't screw that one up. So that's all I was going for there.
That's the age-old question. That's the age-old question. Is it the player? Is it the players?
Well,
is it
Tommy T here with the continuation on that. The players from the Legion of Boom said it was Dan Quinn.
Yeah.
All right. And they're not the only ones who had high praise for Dan Quinn. You mentioned Shanahan, Kyle Shanahan. He was asked about Dan Quinn. He said great things. Matt Ryan was saying great things. You got Logan Paulson, who's been talking nothing but good about Dan Quinn the entire hiring process. Trev, what does it mean to you that we have a coach, a head coach that so many people have gone out of the way. Micah Parsons, as well as some of those former Seattle players, KJ Wright, as an example, who've just talked just glowingly about Dan Quinn and love that he got a second chance because they know that he deserves the opportunity. He's a good head coach.
Whatever is in lockstep with the vision of the GM in the front office. If Dan Quinn's the guy, Dan Quinn's the guy. And it's pretty cool that Dan Quinn is their guy, because from outside looking in, first glance, like me and you, Nathan, we were like, oh, we don't want Dan Quinn. Like, no, 28-3 Super Bowl, like all that stuff that's come there. We're like, no. But it was nice to hear from the front office and the GM spot mentioning and going into detail what they're looking for as a head coach. And then to hear how Dan Quinn meets that criteria to a T. I'm on board. When Ron Rivera was hired, it was all about culture. It wasn't anything else like detail as the vision as this new regime has. And it's just like, oh, he's been to the Super Bowl with Cam Newton. Let's hire him. He's, a good defense guy. They did their due diligence and very detailed in what they're looking for. And Dan Quinn fits the bill in every single category, which is very surprising, but also helpful now as being a fan of this organization, because now we know who Dan Quinn really is, instead of just, oh, he's the guy who lost the Super Bowl to Tom Brady 28-3. You know what I mean? So I'm on board still. I'm excited. He's picked a good staff, like we're going to get to. That's cool. They didn't promote a lot of people from within. It's just a nice, new, good feeling again. Like, and I know we keep getting Ashburn with all these press conferences and all this stuff, but for this one, for real, just seems like real and authentic. Like, he saw how excited he was getting off the plane. Like, he was surprised that Adam Peters met him. Came out to the plane. Yeah. Like, that doesn't happen. I mean, I'm sure it happened somewhere else, but it doesn't happen in Washington. So for that to happen, that's cool. And then, he's there when he gets to meet Kliff Kingsbury and Joe Whitt. Like, Peters is always there. Like, it's just a good thing to see. It feels like we're actually becoming an NFL football organization for once. So.
And I think what also noticed in that press conference is really the synergy between Peters and Quinn, which is incredibly important to a football team, especially a team starting all over, that you've got a brand new general manager who's getting his first shot, and you've got this new coach who's coming in, and you could see that connection that that they're going to work together well, that they're not going to be button heads. They're not going to have a power struggle. It's not going to be a situation. I mean, if Bill Belichick comes in here, for example, and he sits there and he's having this conversation with Adam Peters, it just, you probably could just tell it wasn't going to work, because there'd be a power struggle. And I think that's also kind of where it came down to when they decided to make the hire for this coach, is that if Adam Peters doesn't feel it with, for example, Ben Johnson or Bobby Slowick or Anthony Weaver, any of these guys, he just doesn't feel it, then it's not going to work, regardless of what the public thinks and regardless of maybe what Josh Harris thinks, because Josh Harris also has to think about the selling of this whole organization. In terms, he's going to be able to sell Ben Johnson way better than he's able to sell Dan Quinn when it comes to season tickets, when it comes to just getting a fan base to buy in. Ben Johnson would have been the pick for that if you're Josh Harris. But Adam Peters is making this decision. Adam Peters is making this decision almost fully. And so you see that synergy between the two, that they have to work together, that they're going to have to figure out the roster and the quarterback and all these other things, the assistant coaches. But you can see them that they're going to work together. And you could get that sense in that press conference.
And I think there was no like sudden awkwardness, no sudden quiet time. Like when they were questioning about quarterbacks and stuff, it was just like they knew which questions to attack without even being like, hey, you wanted to, it's just like boom, boom. You just are, like you were saying, the chemistry is like already there, it seems like.
And I think that's important to note, and because a lot of people want to say that Dan Quinn is just Ron Rivera 2.0, and I can understand some of the similarities that people are trying to draw upon when it comes to that. Even Stoner himself was just like, he's a Ron Rivera type coach in that CEO aspect. But Stoner, you had an excellent quote that we had shared where it was that Ron Rivera came in. It was a coach-centric approach. He got to be the GM and he got to be the head coach, and it didn't work out. He burned down the kitchen.
He bought the groceries, and then when it came time to fix dinner, he burned down the kitchen, right? And this time, Dan Quinn's not buying the groceries. Adam Peters is buying the groceries, so just go ahead and let Dan Quinn cook. That's all he needs to do, right? He just needs to take what the general manager gives him and put it together on the field and coach him up.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think that one of those things that you guys talking about with the chemistry that is there, and one of the reasons Dan Quinn's the hire and maybe not of Vrabel, who is a respected coach and a lot of people expected to be picked up this coaching cycle, is that Dan Quinn has the awareness. And I think that was the biggest thing I took away from the press conference, was that he's aware, right? We talked about the fact that he did that 360 review and he talked with players. Logan Paulson was only on the team for like a year, if that, right? And he talked with him. He talked with the other players. He's like, what didn't go right? What didn't go wrong? He talked up and he really wanted to figure it out. And that brought some awareness to him. He realized after the Super Bowl, when he decided to take on some of those GM type responsibilities, he mucked up. He really did. He really, and he knew that was a mistake. And I remember this from the interview process. They talked about what went wrong, and he understood once Kyle Shanahan left, he didn't have a replacement for him. He didn't have a plan for what would happen when he lost a premier talent in the coordinator position. And he kind of gave a way forward for that. And I think those things were really good at winning over the front office, winning over Harris and Adam Peters and whatnot. Winning over fans is going to take a while. Winning over fans is going to be December timeframe. Where's the team at?
Sure.
You know, have they been competitive in games? Are they winning games? That's what's going to win, I think, more fans over to this. Those ones who are still on the fence, those ones are waiting. I want wins. That's what I want. I do think that Dan Quinn appears to be the right hire. He's not the exciting hire. He's not what we were really hoping for, but I do think that he was absolutely the right hire for Washington right now. And I'm going to, I'm not going to wait and see this one out. I'm not sitting on the fence for this one. I'm on Dan Quinn's side, but I would like to see this actually have the effects here. You got to point to this, or can I get to TJ's comment?
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
TJ here was, why did it take him 3+ years to get another head coaching job? Trev, I don't know if you remember, or you shared it in our group here. He had opportunities, right? And he actually decided not to go seek those opportunities because he wanted to spend some time kind of getting things together. Do you think that that is a good thing for Washington, that he didn't jump right back in the saddle?
Heck yeah, it is. I mean, it's the year for due diligence, and that's exactly what our front office, GM has done, and that's exactly what Dan Quinn has done the past 3 years. He wants to get back into it, but he mentioned at the press conference why, because somebody said, why Washington? He was looking for certain markers that fit his criteria to make sure he was ready to go be a head coach again, and we were that opportunity. Not saying that previous opportunities didn't have maybe a few things here and there that fit his markers, but he just didn't want to do it until the time was right, and you take it and grab it and run like hell, he said. So that's what he did with us. Everything that we have provided for him to be successful here and to pitch to him to be a head coach was on his own checklist. And what it's like Christmas. He's been asking for this for 3 years for Christmas, and it finally came. That's what it is. So if that's just great to hear. This is weird that we're saying that and how excited we are, because it probably happens a lot. I mean, you see it in LA Rams with Wes Snead and Sean McVay.
We were excited last season for Eric Bieniemy. Why not Washington? We all fell hook, line, and sinker.
So to hear 2 years in a row that well-respected coaches want to come here and put their impact on this organization is just something good to hear, and that you don't hear often in this organization.
Yeah, I think it's good. I think it's good that he's a discerning coach, that he has an ability to kind of look at situations and not just jump into something that is instant gratification. whatever job comes up, whatever they offer me, I'm going for it. I don't care. He looked at these other opportunities last year and turned some down, or at least took his name out of the running for certain jobs because he looked at it and he said, it's just not quite the right fit. I want an owner that I feel comfortable, that is committed to winning and given the resources to win. I want a general manager who I can be in lockstep with, that I understand what they're doing and what their success has been in the past. And you can't deny Adam Peters' success, any of the stops he's been, even though he hasn't been the main guy, but still any of the stops. And then being able to get with a heritage organization. Okay, Washington hasn't done anything in 30 years, but Washington is definitely a heritage organization in the NFL, in the game of football. So you put all that together, and it's just a fantastic spot for him. He didn't worry about that he's going from a division rival to of the Cowboys and coming to Washington and have to face his former team twice. He saw a perfect situation, and this is what he wanted, and he went after it. He went after it hard. He went after this job really hard. He didn't go after those other jobs hard. He went after this Washington job. That's what he saw. And we even talked about it, a few weeks ago, maybe a month or so. Is Washington of the 7 choices that were out there, were they one of the best destinations in terms of where a coach would want to go? And we all thought they were 1 or 2 or maybe even 3 at worst. And I think it kind of played out that you saw a guy like Dan Quinn trying to get this particular job only, not any of those other jobs.
Ended up being number 1 in GM world for a job to get. For a head coach, it seemed like we were going to be on the back burner, and this process took forever. And we honestly thought once we got the head coaching position, we thought, hey, maybe we're going to be out of luck getting some of the premier talent on the coordinator. But one of the reasons why you hire Dan Quinn is those connections and the ability to get coordinators. Stoner's going to stop this beautiful transition.
It was, but you forgot about, remember I had my, I wanted to ask a question earlier, right? I know. Sorry that you couldn't do your radio.
We'll get back to the beautiful transition in a little bit.
But I had a question for you guys, and we kind of brought it up before, and it's completely related to Dan Quinn. But because he wasn't necessarily Washington's first choice, right? And because he is a retread, and because he's an older guy, I keep putting all those in air quotes, right? Does that mean that he will have a shorter leash? Not from the fans' perspective, because we don't care what the leash is. If you suck, you suck after 2 years. But from management, from Adam Peters, from Josh Harris in the group, will he have a shorter leash because he's not a young 36-year-old first-time head coach that maybe needs a little more seasoning? Does he have a shorter leash? Do you expect something after 2 years, and then maybe you have to pull the plug? Whereas with, for example, Ben Johnson might have got 3 or 4 years of a lot of losing because he's young, because he's a first-timer?
Well, that's tough because that depends on how well does he do in those 2 years. Are you talking about if he's winning 4, 5, 6 games those 2 years, and he's probably gone. But if he's winning 9, 10, maybe 11 games, I don't think they get rid of him. Because
11 games, he's going in the Hall of Fame.
Okay,
he's going
all right. Well, then, make your question a little bit more detailed, but not see what you're saying. I don't think so because
just shorter leash.
I think because of the way Dan Quinn interviewed and got to know Peters and how they became so trustworthy and kicked it off so well, that I think that Peters realized that Dan really wants to be successful. He really wants this. And I think that you don't give somebody a leash when you've done what Dan Quinn has said he's done, taking a step back, being a defensive coordinator, asking former players, what can I do better? What can I do worse? Doing the research on being a better head coach, and then getting that opportunity and taking it. I think that you can't give somebody like that. I mean, it's a business, but 2 years, if we win 8 games next year and 9 games next year, he might still stay just because it's an improvement, and he's actually showing improvement as a head coach and as But
I get that, Trev. But let me rephrase it to you, then, Trev.
Okay.
Let me rephrase it.
All right.
Let's say next year they win 5 games, and the year after that they win 5 games.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
not much going on here, right?
Yeah.
Would you pull the plug on Dan Quinn faster? I'm talking about faster than you would for an example, Ben Johnson, who again, what I'm trying to say is that he's a young guy, first time at it. Maybe he needs more room to grow. Does Dan Quinn get the plug pulled faster than a young guy would? If you're still losing, would you? Let me ask you this: Would you get rid of Dan Quinn if they won 5 games next year and 5 games the year after?
I'm looking at coordinators.
Okay, so would you get rid of Ben Johnson if it was 5 wins next year and 5 years the year after?
Yeah.
I mean, would you look at it the same?
I would get rid of him because the difference is Dan's been a head coach before and Ben Johnson hasn't. So it's kind of a hard example. That means maybe Ben Johnson is not ready to be a head coach and you got to let him go and he can go maybe fit somewhere else or go back to coordinating. But Dan, I don't know, man. It's tough. I don't know. Nathan? It's too early to tell.
No, the leash isn't shorter. I actually brought this up several weeks ago in the process, saying that one of the knocks on a retread would be that you would not necessarily give them as long of a leash. Now that's really true for the fan base, but for the ownership, they're going to, especially with Josh Harris, a patient individual, wants to let this kind of ride out, see the process. He does not stick with Ron Rivera if he is a hasty decision maker. He would have cut that tie mid-season, but he promised to give him a year, got the year, cut bait with them as the first opportunity that he got post-season, right? And so, but when it came to the leash thing, I was thinking more of a fan base wise. Fan base wise, you have a 5-win season, or even another 3-win season with a new head coach. You likely are like, well, they still need things. Dan Quinn has experience. And if they have 3 wins and then 5 wins or back-to-back years of 5, like you were pointing out, fans would be like, the first year you might be able to forgive. The second year, no, you've had time to put your people in place. You know better as a head coach. But with a new coach, you'd be like, maybe there's still something missing. Maybe they just need this one thing to click. With the ownership, with Adam Peters, there's going to be a lot more leeway. Spoiler alert for the question we're actually going to ask in the cool down, the actual how far will this group take us? That's going to be in the cool down. But spoiler alert for me, I don't expect this unit to go 5 wins and 5 wins. Okay. Right. I do think we'll see marketed growth next season. And we're 17-0 until we find out otherwise anyways. But realistically speaking, I think that this group will be better because of Dan Quinn, his leadership. And I really can't believe I'm saying all this because just last week, it's on tape. Last week I was hammering Dan Quinn.
We hated him.
But I do think that this team is better off for having a Dan Quinn, and especially because what I did say last week was a positive. He was the guy who couldn't go out and hire talent. That was one of his biggest traits here. And Dominique hits that. Having Dan Quinn gets you Kliff Kingsbury and Joe Whitt Jr. And we're going to be talking about them here in the game. And spoiler alert, one of us, not a big fan of one of the hires. So stick around with us for the game. Washington hired Dan Quinn, and he got to work right away putting in his staff. The first person he brought on board was Joe Whitt Jr., and I had seen a comment earlier about had anybody ever heard of him prior to
Gus Bus.
Yeah, no one ever mentioned Joe Whitt Jr., right? He wasn't in line for a head coach job. He was a defensive coordinator in waiting, though. Make no doubts about it. If Dan Quinn does not take Joe Whitt Jr., which I'll call Whitt from here on out, but if he does not take Whitt away from Dallas, Whitt becomes the defensive coordinator for the Dallas Cowboys. Make
Probably.
no doubt about it. He was ready.
That was his dream job.
Here's the problem with Joe Whitt.
Oh,
and
God.
it's just what it's just what Gus said. This is what I've got on Joe Whitt. You see that is blank. I got nothing.
You haven't done enough research, Stoner.
Not only had we never mentioned him a week before, I never heard of the dude before.
I can tell you, trying to find pictures for the graphics was heinous. It was awful.
I had never heard of him before everybody started talking about he's the next Dan Quinn defensive coordinator. We gotta slow our roll on this whole Joe Whitt love affair. I'm okay with saying that Dan Quinn, as Nathan talked about even before we came over to this section, is Dan Quinn knows how to hire people. He knows how to find guys that can do a great job. So that I'm trusting him. I don't got a clue on whether or not Joe Whitt's going to be a good defensive coordinator or not. So I'm just gonna throw my hands up and say, I hope, but for us to drink the Kool-Aid that Joe Whitt's the second coming of Dan Quinn as defensive coordinator, we just got to slow our roll on that a little bit. We know nothing about him.
Trev also throwing his hands up, but this time he's trying to just interrupt to get his.
I don't necessarily think that if you haven't heard the name or the guy before the hire doesn't necessarily take away his credibility of being that.
Not at all. Not at all.
So,
but we got to stop coronating this guy as the next great defensive coordinator when we don't know anything about him.
I don't think we're saying he's the next great defensive coordinator. I think we're just happy that Dan Quinn got his guy to be defensive coordinator. So if he was in line to be defensive coordinator for Dallas, which was his dream job, why is it a problem to be a defensive coordinator here?
It's not.
I mean, obviously, besides that. Well, it seems like you have a problem with it right now.
I don't have a problem with it. What I have a problem with, see, you're trying to twist my words. What I have a problem with is saying that he's just good, that he's great. This is a great hire. We don't know.
I think it's in the terms of Dan getting his guy.
Right.
Now, okay, let me ask you this. If we went and got Al Harris and made him D coordinator, what would you say?
I'd say I know a little bit more about him, but I still don't know a whole lot about him. Now, if you went out and I'm just throwing something out there just to see if it'll stick or whatever. If we say we went out and we got Bill Belichick to be the defensive coordinator, well, then I would have an informed opinion about Bill Belichick because I know all about him. But I know nothing about Joe Whitt. And I can go and look at a little bit of of his information that's out there, and I can see what he did with Dallas defensive backs, which is super impressive. Yeah. But to just say a defensive back coach is all of a sudden going to be the next great defensive coordinator, I'm not ready to do that. But I am ready to trust Dan Quinn that he hired this guy.
Yeah. Okay.
But I mean, people are out there, and a lot of people are saying that this is a great hire, that Joe Whitt's a great hire. I just don't know that.
There needs to be context behind that, because if it's according to Dan Quinn getting his guys, then yeah, it's a great hire. But if you're looking at it for a defensive coordinating standpoint, how is it a great hire? We've never seen it before.
Yeah.
The way that I look at it, because we're going to have a much longer conversation on Kliff Kingsbury, because he is a much more known quantity.
Yeah.
The way I look at it with Whitt is with WJ is that he is a Dan Quinn hire. He knows the Dan Quinn system, and he's had great success back-to-back years with the Dallas defensive backs. And if we're going to give Dan Quinn credit for the Legion of Boom, we can give credit for what he's done with the likes of
Ron Bland
and breaking NFL records, with Diggs leading the league in interceptions 2 seasons ago. Like, make no doubt about it, the guy can coach and is in a position coach that is something that Washington desperately needs. They took 2 players back-to-back, first and second round last year, that need coaching up. And I think Quan Martin is going to be outstanding in a WJ-led unit, but that's also because I'm very high on Quan Martin. Okay. I think we might see Emmanuel Forbes kind of bounce back because he's going to have a little bit more coaching there. And more than a few people mentioned this, JG being one of the ones who first put it there, was how many position coaches do you actually know of other teams? Now you get on this all the time, Stoner, especially in our side chats when, people wanted, oh my goodness, he's now an offensive coordinator, but you said no one heard of him a week before. Cause I actually wanted him. He was the kid of the Houston coach. Why am I spacing on his name?
Ben Slowick?
Not Slowick.
Wait, what?
The kid of the former Houston coach, or no, it was maybe it's Denver. Kubiak. The Kubiak kid, right? A lot of people, myself included, was just like, "Hey, get him," because Kubiak offense is a Shanahan offense, would be great to get him. But most of these position coaches you don't hear. Right. Okay, they usually excel.
That's right.
How many people wanted Harris to be the defensive coordinator here for years? He was our defensive back coach. I know you didn't, Stoner, but this is my point. Is like, yeah, most people, we don't really pay attention to position coaches. I would guarantee you, even Allison, who watches our channel and she's a Philadelphia Eagles fan, if we were to quiz her on the position coaches of Washington, she made Jennifer King, the assistant running back one. Would she be able to know? It's Trev. You're a fan of this team. Who's the actual running back? Who was the running back coach?
Randy Jordan.
Okay.
Randy Jordan.
Okay. So you did know that. All right. I don't know why I tried to get you on that one, but I was just like, I'm trying to point out most people don't pay attention to those.
Right.
No,
Trev does. And that's why people watch us here on Ref the District.
All you're doing is feeding into my point, Nathan. All you're doing is feeding into it. We don't know anything about it. So we got to stop going out there and say what a great hire that Joe Whitt is a fantastic hire for Washington. You can say Dan Quinn is bringing this guy and hope he works out. But
didn't you just call Dan Quinn? Weren't you
know.
Smoking a stogie because you're right that Dan Quinn was hired and that Dan Quinn's going to be a great hire and all this other stuff and let Dan Quinn cook? So how can we say that Dan Quinn is a good hire, but we can't say Whitt Jr. is a good hire?
Because you have a file. Because you have a file on Dan Quinn. You've got no
file on Joe Whitt Jr. It's just no coordinating position. That's all. Right. It's all position.
Right.
Bro, how do you think these D coordinators get D coordinator jobs? They got to start somewhere.
You're right. But you just got to stop. You got to stop putting.
I don't got to stop nothing.
Yeah,
I'm ready for Joe Whitt Jr. He's gonna make me run through a wall.
I hope he's going to be great, and I think he has a chance to be great. And I think the opportunity that Dan, the whole point that Dan Quinn picked him, that's great. But I just don't, people are out there crowning this guy, and we just can't be crowning.
How about there's some excitement? JG here, a potential great hire. Does that work for you?
But what if they had hired
people?
What if
be
Dan
excited
Quinn,
about things? Stoner.
Okay, what if Dan Quinn hired Steve Jacobson? What if Dan Quinn hired Steve Jacobson, who is the Tampa Bay's linebackers coach? Would everybody be crowning Steve Jacobson as a great hire?
No, because it's not. I think they're saying that only because it's Dan Quinn's guy. They're probably wording it differently for you, Stoner, but that's pretty much my opinion why they're saying great hire, because they did their research and saw that he was in Dallas with Dan Quinn previously.
Yeah.
He's taken over that defense. He's also had great success there. Yeah. I would have to actually look into the linebacker success for Tampa Bay. I know everyone's really high on White, but that's something I'd want to see. Now, Gus Bus here challenging you a little bit, Stoner, on this. Who's the better DC hire, the defensive coordinator hire? Shane Bowen for the Giants, because he has previous defensive coordinator experience, or Joe Whitt Jr. for the Commander?
Well, I would have to look more into Shane Bowen, but if Dan Quinn said Shane Bowen is the better hire, then I'm with Dan Quinn. But I'm not going to crown Shane Bowen.
Contradicted yourself.
Get your man, Trev.
You literally just said the opposite for Joe Whitt Jr.
No, I didn't. You don't know anything about Joe Whitt Jr. because all he's done is coach some defensive backs in Dallas for a couple of years. And all of a sudden, we're saying this is a great hire.
That's what we're going off. Yeah, because what has Jack Del Rio done in the past years?
I'm not comparing him to other people. I'm comparing him to I need to be able to see something and then make an informed opinion instead of just crowning him. Oh,
Stop trying to take this away from us, bro. We haven't had this kind of.
Go ahead, Trev.
I'm done with my point.
I'm done with him as well. You know why I'm done with him? I'm done with him because I guarantee you, if he would have been like, hey, I really like Joe Whitt Jr. last week as like a potential defensive coordinator hire, he would be like, he's the best ever and he's all this other stuff. Even he would ignore everything he's saying right now if he would have looked into it and said, this is the guy who we need to hire as a defensive coordinator. 100%. Because he's doing it with Dan Quinn.
Yes, that's exactly right.
I totally made up Steve Jacobson as the linebackers coach in Tampa. Totally made it up.
I was never even heard of that.
But last week I could have said, what about this? What about let's just make up a guy. His name's Joe Whitt. And you're like, Joe Whitt? You're just making up names. And I'll be like, you're right, I'm making up names. But
again, you don't pay attention to those position coaches on other teams.
You do, especially with the next dude we're going to talk about. You pay very close.
My God.
Not a position coach.
Here we go.
Not a position coach. Okay. You're right, and that's a good transition into it, but not a position coach. He was an offensive advisor in USC. He was the head coach in Arizona, and he was an offensive coordinator before that. Stoner, you don't like this guy.
No, I don't.
Why? Please tell us. God. Trev's already sitting back. Where's the popcorn, Trev?
I don't know.
Stoner taking all the good mojo from the Dan Quinn talk. He's doing on Joe Whitt Jr. and he's about to smash Kliff Kingsbury, saying that he's out already.
This is the same thing you guys were getting on me about a couple weeks ago when everybody was all in love with Ben Johnson, and I said I don't think they should hire Ben Johnson. I think they should hire a Ron Rivera type coach, and you all mocked me just like you're mocking me now. Because I take off the burgundy and gold glasses and I look at it from an entire view instead of just from an insider's view. And look at Kliff Kingsbury, and I think Stephen A. Smith said it very well. If I would have said it.
He's an NBA guy, but go ahead.
All he's done is fail up. Stephen A. said it, so I'm stealing it from him. But I 100% agree. You
gotta be kidding me.
He has failed at every spot that he's been in. But that's not the whole reason. Okay. He failed at Texas Tech. Completely failed. He failed in Arizona. He failed last year at USC. Last year, he took a Heisman Trophy winner and actually made him worse as the quarterback's coach at USC.
Oh my God.
Quarterback's coach, but go ahead.
I think he was the quarterback's offensive
on my podcast.
Whatever he was.
Yeah.
He was
offensive
in charge of
advisor.
I could not.
Okay. Listen. Listen.
I should even come back.
Not locked on law, not the only clown, apparently. We got one here with the buckle back hat.
Oh my God.
That's a really kind of basic way of looking at it. And that's not why I'm going to tell you that I don't like him as a coach. But I just want that to be known that he hasn't been very successful ever since he had that job at the University of Houston under first Dana Holgorsen and then Kevin Sumlin. And then they took it up to Texas A&M and he had Johnny Manziel and turned him into a Heisman Trophy winner. And then after that, he got the Texas Tech job and he hasn't been good since then.
Clarification on he hasn't been good. Right now? He hasn't been, we can hear you, Trev. Clarification on he hasn't been good. Are you referring to his head coaching record or are you referring to his offenses? Because he is not here as a head coach. He is here as an offensive coordinator.
Great.
And those haven't been too shabby.
Putting it on a silver platter.
That's what I do, Stoner. That's what I do.
I appreciate that. First, let me just say the style of his offense. It's an air raid offense, right? This is not this is
It's an air raid run heavy offense.
Air raid run heavy offense, absolutely. And in terms of the run heavy, I love that. I think one year he was even like a 51%, 49% pass to run ratio. Love it.
Wow, that's
right. I love that part of his
there.
game. But he is an air raid guy. He learned under Mike Leach. If you ever look at what Mike Leach did, he didn't care one iota about defense, which is fine as a head coach. That's fine. And all they did was they passed the ball 80% of the time. But he modified it when he went to the NFL because he knows he has to run the ball in the NFL. Okay, so and what they do is they take advantage of spreading everybody out and the quarterback being able to look at the defense and find a favorable matchup and take advantage of that matchup. Very quarterback, not only friendly but dependent. You have to have an excellent quarterback for his offenses to work. So that's great. But you also need a running quarterback in his type of offense, or at least that's what's been successful.
A mobile QB. Doesn't have to be a running quarterback, but a mobile QB.
More running quarterback. Like calling run plays for Kyler Murray. He calls a lot of run plays for Kyler Murray. Okay, in 4 years at Arizona.
Fair, Kyler Murray just happens to be an A+ running.
That's why they drafted him. That's why they drafted him at 1 year after drafting Josh Rosen. They drafted Kyler Murray because Kliff Kingsbury said, this is the guy that's going to make my offense work. Josh Rosen is not the guy. 4 years at Arizona. If you take those 4 years that he was at Arizona head coach, they were 15th in points, and they were 15th in yards, and they were 18th in yards per play. Average. Okay? We'd kill for that here in Washington. Okay, but
still an improvement here.
But we're putting Kliff Kingsbury up on this pedestal again, that he's the greatest offensive coordinator.
No one's actually put. You're the first one to talk about Kliff Kingsbury. I don't think anyone's put him up on a pedestal.
All of the advanced metrics in the 4 years where he was there, his offenses, middle of the pack. They were run heavy offenses, which is great. Now he didn't have Kyler Murray especially that last year when Kyler Murray blew out his ACL, right? So he didn't have him for that particular year. But think about some of the quarterbacks that he's had and how he's fared with them. He had Patrick Mahomes at Texas Tech. He had Baker Mayfield for a year, also, by the way, at Texas Tech. But he had Patrick Mahomes at Texas Tech. They went 13-15 in those 28 games at Texas Tech. Go look at every single starting NFL quarterback, and you will see that those quarterbacks, other than Patrick Mahomes, those quarterbacks improved their teams, made their teams better than if you compare it to years before and then years after they left. Even the guys like Kirk Cousins at Michigan State, look at what their teams did before and after, and look at what they did while he was there. Dak Prescott at Mississippi State. So, and you can just go down all the quarterbacks. When you're in college, when you're a special talent that's going to be a franchise quarterback in the NFL, you make your team better in college. And he did that with Johnny Manziel when he was at Texas A&M. But he didn't do it with Patrick Mahomes. And he definitely didn't do it when he had Caleb Williams last year as well. Here's the point that I don't like about his offense. It is an air raid. It does spread people out. There's a lot of good qualities to it. But I'm going to tell you what it's going to look like. You ready? You ready for what it's going to look like? First game of the year, first time Washington has the ball, first down and 10 at the 25. You ready, Trev? I'm going to use last year's players. I know it's not going to be this coming year's players, all of them, but I'm going to use last year so you can because we're all familiar with these guys. Wide left is going to be Terry McLaurin. In the slot, it's going to be slot left is going to be Logan Thomas. Slot right is going to be Curtis Samuel. Wide right, Jahan Dotson. Sam Howell's going to be in the shotgun, and Brian Robinson's going to be either beside him or next to him.
Okay.
There's going to be zero motion. There is going to be zero shifting. And this is first down. And I don't know what he's going to do. He's going to run the ball for 6 yards. There's not going to be any play action. So he got 6 yards. Cool. You know what's going to look like on second down, Trev?
What,
Terry
Stoner?
McLaurin's going to be wide left. Logan Thomas is going to be slot left. Curtis Samuel's going to be slot right. Jahan Dotson's going to be wide right. Sam Howell's going to be in shotgun. Brian Robinson behind him or next to him. There's going to be no motion. There's going to be no play action. And he's going to drop back and whatever's going to happen. Ready, Trev? It's third and 4 now, Trev. Guess what it's going to look like, Trev?
Let me guess. Terry McLaurin wide left. Logan Thomas slot left. Curtis Samuel slot right. Jahan Dotson is wide right. Brian Robinson. Oh, maybe Gibby this time because it's third down. Gibby back there with Sam Howell in the shotgun. And they're going to call a...
And there's going to be no motion, no shifting, no play action, and they're going to run a play.
Gosh.
The point is that 1 year in Arizona, Trev, DeAndre Hopkins lined up wide left, the exact same spot, 88% of the time. 88% of the time. In the 4 years that Kliff Kingsbury was head coach in Arizona and running the offense, they were DFL. You know what DFL is? Dead effing last in pre-snap motion. They were DFL in play action passes. And they were 31st in times the quarterback was under center. It's going to look exactly the same every single down. And you're just going to sit there and go, make an adjustment, bro, because this looks exactly the same.
Okay.
So that's why I don't like it. We have moved on from the air raid. We have moved on from this spread offense. There are 2 guys, maybe 3 guys in the entire NFL who can run a good spread offense. Guys like Jalen Hurts, Patrick Mahomes.
Interesting.
Right. You're right. Special quarterbacks can do it. I'm not saying they can't. And dude in Buffalo, Josh Allen. Everybody else, and especially the successful ones, they run a version of the West Coast offense. It's all coming back to the West Coast offense, to running the ball, putting your quarterback under center, tons of motion, play action passes. That's what that's what the NFL is coming back to. He's part of the the cool school of the Mike McDaniels and the O'Connells and the McVays, to where they're just doing all kinds of crazy. But even McVay has adjusted. Once he got Stafford, he said, we need to run the ball. We need a West Coast offense, quick passing. That's why I don't like him.
So you mean to tell me you have more faith in our head coach, who is a retread, than you do our offensive coordinator, who's a retread. So pretty much you're saying that Kliff Kingsbury, what he did as a head coach in the past as offensive coordinator, is going to be the same thing he does here. So does that mean the same thing that Dan Quinn did in Atlanta, that's going to be the same thing he did here? No, it doesn't.
That's a fair question.
Quarterbacks that Kliff Kingsbury has worked with are all successful. I'm not even getting to the point of what kind of offense we're going to have. I'm more focused on our quarterback, because if the quarterback can't execute it, I don't care what kind of offense you bring here. It's on the quarterback.
Fair.
You said he made Caleb Williams worse. If that's the case, then why are we discussing on Twitter about trading up to get him at number 1 if we made him worse? He won the Heisman last year, and this year Jaden Daniels won the Heisman, and he's still projected number 1 over the Heisman winner. How can you say he has made quarterbacks worse? He spent time with Patrick Mahomes. Look where he is. He spent time with Baker Mayfield, who some people on this show would not have minded seeing Baker Mayfield in the burgundy and gold. Look what he did with Caleb Williams at USC this past year.
Yeah.
Look what he's done with Kyler Murray in Arizona. The ranking of offense, 18th, that sounds way better than being 30th, 31st, 32nd. And who's to say he's not going to adjust the way he did
Sure hope he
when
does.
he was in the position before?
I sure hope he does.
I see what you're saying, but I don't think that he gets hired as offensive coordinator based on what he did 5 years ago. I think they hired him based on the quarterback from this draft class, which is Caleb Williams, and he is the closest thing that worked with Caleb Williams that we have in the building. Like Louis Riddick said it, he's the only person in our building who knows the most about Caleb Williams.
Mm-hmm.
If you can bring Caleb Williams here and design him and make him successful in the offense, you're not going to be complaining about the offense in week 6 when we're scoring 35 points with no pre-snap motion. So maybe he's going to – it's just too early to say that you can't be excited or upset about it, because he could adjust just the way Dan Quinn has to adjust. We're already sold on him because Dan Quinn just gave us his word. But I'm looking at the success in the past, the stats of Kliff Kingsbury, all the quarterbacks he's had a hand in, whether it's senior offensive assistant, head coach, or OC, they've been quite successful. I'm all in.
I think those are all very valid points. And look, the
old man, I was about to say more old man yelling at a cloud.
What do you want, Bob McAdoo in here to be on OC? Is that what you wanted?
But I think I think the qualities of an air raid offense are valid. I think spreading out teams, and then if you see that they're in zone, you simply run short crossing routes, get the ball out quick. And if they're not in a zone, then you got a man-to-man, and the quarterback can look and he can say, oh, Curtis Samuel's got a linebacker on him. I'm going to Curtis Samuel on this play because I see a favorable matchup because they're all spread out and you know who's covering who if they're in man-to-man. Or they could say, oh, McLaurin's got doesn't have deep safety help. He doesn't have cover 2. He's one-on-one. I'm going to McLaurin because I know he's going to beat his guy out there. So there's that advantage. And there's also the advantage that you can do an up-tempo because, as we talked about, DeAndre Hopkins played 88% of his snaps were in one spot. Well, if they're in up-tempo, DeAndre Hopkins knows exactly where he needs to go, and he doesn't have to listen to the play and say, oh, I'm all the way on the right side. I got to go out. No, he knows exactly where he's going to – all the players do. But I'm just using DeAndre Hopkins as an example. They all know exactly where they need to be because that's what the offense is. So there are some advantages to this. And especially with his running game, he adapted it to allow his running game to be a bigger factor. And there are some points within how he sets up his running game, which I really like as well. But I'm just saying that we got to be careful because he's running an offense that was cool 5 years ago, was really cool 10 years ago. But 5 years ago, it was
Stoner would only cool like anymore. It if it was 20 years ago. That's what he wants. Is it's got to be as old as he is.
Like see, what's happened to him is he did too much research on Ben Johnson and Slowick and saw how creative they were. And now they're like, oh, we're gonna have a boring air raid offense. If it scores points, bro, if it makes the quarterback comfortable and successful and actually gives him a chance to look at receivers,
hey.
Let's do it.
If you guys are happy with 15th best, if you're happy with middle of the pack, we got our guy.
How about we wait to see how it plays out with him as a dedicated offensive coordinator? Because Stoner and Tommy T put it out here earlier. He is here. Kliff Kingsbury is here 100%. Because Dan Quinn wanted him, because Dan Quinn said, this guy runs an offense that I hate to see. You like Dan Quinn. You like Dan Quinn as a defensive coordinator. You think that he runs this great defense and he's a great defensive mind. Right? And he's telling us that Kliff Kingsbury is going to run an offense that is going to give other teams fits. And Kliff Kingsbury, like Trev mentioned, a little bit of a QB whisperer, so it doesn't matter what they do with the two. We can expect improvement with whoever's at QB, and this offense is going to improve because we were bottom of the barrel. We were bad.
I'll take middle of the barrel any day over what we were just at.
Not me. No, not me. I don't strive
for middle. Yes, you would.
We'd be happy with it 1 year, but you better get yourself in top 10 the next year. You better keep improving, or else we're just going to be the Washington Commanders of Jay Gruden, which was middle of the pack offense.
Okay, well, maybe like Nathan was saying, you think maybe he's going to actually adjust his game and solely focus on the offense rather than having to pleasing everybody in the locker room as a head coach.
Let me be very clear about this point, okay? Let me be very clear. all of these positive points about Kliff Kingsbury, all of these things, especially the part that you just brought up, I think that was Tommy T who said that, is that Dan Quinn wanted Kliff Kingsbury, number one, and number two, wanted him because he found it so difficult to go up against the Kliff Kingsbury offense. I think those are fantastic points.
Caleb Williams.
My point on all of this is let's be careful about thinking Kliff Kingsbury.
No, I'm tired of being careful. We ain't walking on eggshells no more, Stoner. It's a new day. We gotta get hyped. I'm not tiptoeing around in February just because Kliff Kingsbury. Man, you see that house he got? We about to be famous and more well known now. Like, we got Hollywood run the offense, and we got a dedicated dude run the defense.
I am being careful. 30 minutes telling us how Dan Quinn was going to be so good for Washington.
Yeah.
And he spent the next 30 minutes poo-pooing on all of our, like, hey, we actually like these guys.
See, you guys always take it the wrong way. I'm not poo-pooing on them.
You're the Bill Belichick of this podcast. You're stuck. The game is passing you by, and you're not willing to accept it.
See, that's the thing. You guys think the game has passed me by. The game is coming back to me. The game is coming back to where the most successful offenses are the West Coast offense with the quarterback under center for most of the time, with play action passing, with getting the ball out quick.
Let me ask you a question.
Coming back to
the Kansas City Chiefs
in the trenches.
The Kansas City Chiefs have been in the AFC title game and Super Bowl in the past 7 years consecutively. Yeah. And Pat Mahomes has probably been under center 20 times throughout that span. And look what they do.
Not true at all. Not true at all.
Well, you know what I'm saying. Not 20, but he's very high. He's higher up in the shotgun, though. You know that.
No, he's not. The Kansas City offense, if you look at the stats in terms of quarterbacks under center, they're top 10 in how many times he's under center. It's a West Coast style offense that he runs. They don't run this wide open air raid.
Well, too bad. We go in air raid run heavy.
Look
First
at all.
This man was crying because we ain't run the ball enough. And now we got a system that's going to run the ball more. And this man still ain't happy because it's air raid added on to it.
Yeah. Listen, Trev.
What do you want, Stoner? What do you want?
He wants a job with the Washington Commanders as their coordinator. Is what he wants.
I want to be a consultant. That's where the big money is. But it's just like when we talked about, Trev, you know it when you see it. We saw in the second game of the year, this past year, we were like, what the heck is Eric Bieniemy doing? Putting his quarterback back to pass 29 times in the first half of a game, including in game 2 against Denver. If you remember at the end of the first half, he dropped back 23 consecutive times in the first half. Mm-hmm. And we started freaking out because we know that's not what's going to work. And we can recognize that the air raid is going to have some success, but it's not going to be like what you just said, Trev. I don't believe it's going to be awesome.
He could tweak it, bro.
I hope he does.
Scott Turner used pre-snap motion, and what we do with Scott Turner? Nothing. So I don't care about the pre-snap motion. That just means guys are more tired to run their routes. If it's going to score points, and if it fears our head coach, I'm all in, bro. Let's do it. Let's just do it. Let's see what happens. It's going to be awesome.
It's the NFL is cyclical, right? They go through these cycles of what works and what doesn't work.
What a word.
And guess what? It's coming back to having
oh my gosh.
It's coming back to having a West Coast style offense. Win the game in the trenches, run the ball to set up the pass, not pass the ball to set up the run like all these new age people want to do. The Mike McDaniels of the worlds, the Matt LaFleur's
of the Ben Johnsons of the world.
They're all going to end up failing because the way to do it is a West Coast style offense. Andy Reid does it. Kyle Shanahan does it. Dan Campbell does it in Detroit for the most part, not fully. Sean McVay does it. Mike McCarthy does it. They're all running
Did we do it last year?
West Coast style offenses. And that's not air raid, spread guys out, run, pass the ball.
What if you spread guys out and the quarterback's under center? Would that make you happy? Is that the main thing? Is you want the quarterback under center more? Is that your main thing?
I want him under the center more, and I want more play action, and I want
that can come with
movement.
the 4 wide too. You can do that 4 wide.
All right. I now know that I'm going to have to chart all of USC's games and probably most of Arizona games, and I'll put that in this spreadsheet. And I can't promise it next week, but I will have it
coming
for us to review in a little bit. Okay, so then we can actually look at this and definitively talk about these offenses for Kliff Kingsbury. I think there's I don't understand. He's so excited about Dan Quinn and the first 2 guys he hires. He's trying to tell us not to. And do not sit there, Stoner. Do not. I'm going to mute you.
Here we go.
Do not sit there and try to tell us you're not, because just because you throw a couple of little hey, he might be good, out there. That doesn't mean you didn't just spend all of our time. I literally talked 5 minutes in the last 30 minutes because you were going on a tirade yelling at a cloud, old man. We'll mute you. I will absolutely mute you. You and Roger deserve each other, and we love Roger. He's been a long time in a channel. He also doesn't think that the offense is going to be good here. JG coming up with, I think, one of the common things we've heard about Kliff Kingsbury is the relation to an EB style offense. JG here, the thing that worries me most about Kliff is that he sounds too much like EB. A common criticism about this, and when people hear the air raid offense, they think that we're going to be in shotgun 90% of the time, and they think that Washington is going to be this 80 or 70 to 30 type passing to rushing ratio. And we've talked a little bit about how, and Trev, you keep mentioning that it's run heavy. We've talked about how Kliff Kingsbury actually does run the ball. The numbers in Arizona pan out on that. And when he didn't have Kyler Murray because he was injured, Kliff worked with the offense that he had, with the offensive talent that he had, to adjust, and they were more run heavy. They weren't a good team in Arizona, and he was the head coach there, and he's responsible for some of that. But his offenses always did click. Now, yes, Stoner, some of those statistics, and especially the advanced analytics, which you normally hate, so he's only using them because they fit his narrative, okay? Correct. That's the only reason why he's bringing it up, because otherwise he would just use raw numbers to try to drive his point home. But the raw numbers don't fit his narrative, so he had to go to the advanced analytic.
I gave you 15th in points, 15th in yards, and 18th.
That sounds great.
No,
still improvement.
That'll get you
after 1 year. After 1 year, it's good. We did have someone mention Kansas City Chiefs 11th overall in offense, and they're in the Super Bowl. Okay,
they were led by their
here. When you can marry those two together, good things happen. Washington has Whitt Jr. on one side. They have Kliff Kingsbury on the other. With Kliff, I don't think we're going to get that Eric Bieniemy offense. Yes, we'll be in shotgun quite a bit. Okay, that's part of the process. It is part of the process. Absolutely. One of the things, though, is with the air raid offense, you're going to be running pistol formation quite a bit as well.
Sure.
Okay, and that's how they're able to effectively run out of an air raid offense compared to what we saw with Eric Bieniemy. The pistol offense essentially is just, instead of having your guy under center and you're running back behind him, instead you go to shotgun and the guy's behind him. Okay, so you have a downhill runner. And again, Brian Robinson has shown that if you give him a full head of steam, he's difficult to take down. So there's going to be some excitement there.
Yeah.
Is all this wait and see? Yes, we're waiting to see with Dan Quinn. We're waiting to see with Whitt Jr. We're waiting to see on Kliff Kingsbury. But today, especially today, it's all about optimism and what can we hope for and what can we expect and why can't we be happy with that these are our hires? Because honestly, I've seen a few comments that are talking about how, well, what other offensive coordinators out there? I don't even remember what other offensive coordinators. I mentioned Kubiak. The Kubiak kid was one. What was that, Trev?
They were all taken by the time
a lot of them were taken, but Kliff Kingsbury was one of the top talents available in Washington, got him. So there's got to be some excitement here right now in Washington. And we want to see how far that excitement is. how far are Dan Quinn, Kliff Kingsbury, and Whitt Jr. going to take the Commanders? What do you expect after one season? What do you expect after 3 seasons? We'll give you our answers in the cool down. Make sure you stick with us. Welcome to the cool down, where we talk about what's next. Adam Peters, as his head coach and the 2 coordinators, it's now his job to fill out this team and make them successful. So we're going to talk about some of that, but I wanted to kind of in there on the what's next portion of this conversation. What do you expect from the head coach and 2 coordinators here? How far will they take Washington in their first season? Trev, what do you got for us?
We're going to the playoffs, baby.
You know who the team is. It don't matter.
Starts from the top. Starts from the top. Yeah. I have all the faith in the world with the GM and the coaching staff right now. Playoffs. I mean, how do I say this? We've had some great talent here that could have got us there, but the staff and the front office wasn't quite built for that. I could catch a lot of fire for saying that, but we did have some talent. I mean, we did go 8-1, could have made the playoffs that year. We won the championship of the division at 7-9. But based on this last year, no. But yeah, I see a bright future for us, and I trust Adam Peters, and I trust Dan Quinn, and I trust the guys that he chose because those are his guys that he wanted. Playoffs, whether it be a 9-8 wild card spot like the Buccaneers, or we just win the division, maybe. Who knows? You never know. And then you said 3 seasons, conference championship. That's where I see it. Maybe Super Bowl, but conference championship. I trust Adam Peters. He's proved it in San Francisco. It didn't take them long. He knows he's a football guy with the GM title. Like, he knows talent when he sees it. So I'm fully invested in that. And if he does the same thing he did for us in San Francisco, along with the staff, conference championship, why not? Honestly, I feel good every year when something new happens, but I feel it's a different feel good because this is football related. Like, everything coming out that you're hearing is football related, not more stuff of off season, and we don't have to deal with the dark cloud over and the sale of the team and the, Dan Snyder scandals and all that stuff. So I'm delusional. I'm just a fan. 1 year playoffs, 3 years conference championship. That quick of a turnaround.
Gus calling you out on that one. Playoffs screams impatient fan.
Well, I don't have time to be 7 and whatever. Like, it's got to go, bro. We've already hit mediocrity. We've hit the bottom. The only place left to go is the top. I'm tired of saying, 7 wins. I'm not going to be happy with 7 wins. The time is now. Like, I understand it.
Trev, when do you ever think we're going to get 7 wins? You thought we were going to get 12 wins last season.
I
gotta stop listening to training camp. That's what I gotta do. I gotta stop paying attention to training camp reports so heavy. They don't mean jack diddly when it comes to playing.
Man, remember we were all so high on De'Ami Brown, thinking that he was going to be wide receiver 3 by the end of the season. We were high on
Carson Wentz when he came to town because he was throwing dimes.
You were high on Carson Wentz. Do not put that we. Is there a mouse in your pocket? Because
the fan
Lord
base,
knows
the fan base. It was we were so hyped that Stoner was doing a chart of the good days and bad days for Carson Wentz because apparently he was killing it in training camp. So, yes, I'm saying we were somewhat high on Carson Wentz because he's throwing spirals against our defense every day. So I'm not going to do that this year.
No, we're doing that this year with Caleb Williams.
No, it is Caleb Williams. That's why we got Kliff Kingsbury.
I think the biggest thing is when you look at Adam Peters' record, and we've talked about it quite a bit on this show, but when you look at him, what he does well is day 2 and day 3. That's where he really excels. He's got guys on that San Francisco roster. Now, he wasn't in charge, but he was the assistant, so he had a lot of say with John Lynch. And if you ask John Lynch will tell you that Adam Peters pretty much ran the show. He was kind of the CEO of the scout, the front office type deal. But Adam Peters, his day 2 guys, his linebackers and his linemen and his safeties and all these guys, they're all pros. Fred Warner was one of only 3 unanimous all pros. What round was he drafted in? I believe he was the 5th rounder.
I was about to say, I thought 5th.
Right? He's the 5th rounder. Their safety, I can't ever pronounce his name. It's a cool Samoan type name. He was like a fourth or
Oh
fifth
yeah.
round. Guys like
Mhm.
Debo Samuel was a second rounder. Day 2 and day 3 is where he excels. And so that's what we got to keep an eye on is, just think about in the past for Washington, if the guys like De'Ami Brown and Cole Turner and Percy Butler, if all of those guys would have excelled, how much better this team would have been. But those day 2 and day 3 selections were not great, and their number 1 selections weren't great either. But that's what he does well. So that's what we got to count on, and that's what we got to hope that he can do. But this is going to take time, y'all. This is a roster that is not, it's a little bereft of talent, right? It's not loaded with a bunch of guys. They've got some good pieces, but it's very difficult, regardless of how many draft picks they have and how much money they have in the salary. It's very difficult to go from 4 wins to a playoff team. I know Houston did it.
Is it
I know Indianapolis almost did it this past
Detroit?
year. Detroit did it.
Kind
That took
of.
a 3-year process, right?
The
It's
Bengals.
hard to do that.
There
So
are
it takes time.
there are a lot of teams in the NFL parity years, which we're in the prime example of those right now.
Absolutely. Big
Okay.
time.
There's plenty of examples of teams that go from last to first
Sure.
in their division, and that's a playoff spot right there.
Sure.
Okay. So I don't think when people talk about going to the playoffs, which I don't think Washington necessarily is going to do, and that's not my expectation year 1 with this regime. Year 2, yes. Year 1, they need to improve. So just be better than 4 wins. Be competitive. Don't get blown out by 30 points in 4 games. Okay.
Sure.
This is so those are the things I want to see. I want to see those players that we thought highly of. Percy Butler was loved by a lot of smart people, and he just not getting there. And you're talking about draft round picks excelling. We don't even need late round draft picks to excel. We just need them to be competent players.
Yeah.
And a lot of them are looking
to excel.
Well,
I mean, if you want to get to if you want to get to a San Francisco level,
sure. You need a draft pick to excel. You don't need your late rounds. You just need to hit on one person each draft. And then you need to have a couple of good guys in the rest of those picks, right? Washington hasn't really done that. Okay. You can point to Cam Curl, Daron Payne, but they got rid of Chase Young. They got rid of Montez Sweat. So Adam Peters has to hit on those, but it's not just that, it's free agency. And this roster has a lot of holes, but I don't think they're nearly as far off as people make them out to be. I do think that coaching can turn things around. Like I said, I'm not necessarily expecting this to be a deep playoff run this year. Okay. We were, and I said this plenty of times during the season, we are a bad team. Okay. That's not just coaching. That was also just our players were just not good enough on the field of football. All right. So the coaches have a monumental task in front of them. Adam Peters has a monumental task in front of him to be able to fill holes. I do think one thing's going to happen prior to the draft. Washington is going to fill most of, if not all of their big time needs on either edge or offensive line. One of those two is going to be filled prior to the draft.
Okay.
Yes.
So a big name free agent or a big money free agent.
Yes. And I think I can't remember who said this, but I absolutely fully agree to. And so if someone remembers who said this, but I 100% agree with them in this. Adam Peters and Dan Quinn aren't going to do what Ron Rivera did. They're not going to go for bargains that they think that they can maximize the talent out of.
Right.
They're going to go for good quality talent that, regardless of coaching, is just a good player. Now, Washington did have William Jackson, who was seen as the number 1 cornerback. You had Samuels, who was one of the top wide receiver talents. So it's not like Ron Rivera just shot the bargain bin, but Adam Peters and Dan Quinn, I trust the evaluation a little bit more here. And they're going to go after and they're going to fill either the offensive line or they're going to fill an edge. Those are 2 big needs. I still think in the draft they're going to address those positions, but it's not going to be so dire that they need to, as they did last year, go defensive back. Because right now you would have to go edge rusher, because you got nobody over there.
You got nothing, right? Everybody's a free agent. I'm not ready to kind of declare what to expect from this team because we have no idea what it's going to look like. And of course, we have no idea who's going to be the quarterback of this team at this point. We don't know their plan. I mean, I'm 90% sure that they're going to take a quarterback, and then whether they move up to 1 or they stick at 2, they're going to take a quarterback. This opportunity to draft number 2 overall doesn't come along very often. But I can't make any predictions off a team. I have no idea what it's going to look like. Do it. What?
You should base your prediction off of what you just got done ranting and raving about in the last segment.
Just maybe.
If you think our offense is not going to be that great, then you shouldn't expect anything from us this year. You're contradicting yourself right now. You're so sure on Kliff Kingsbury. You're so sure on Dan Quinn. But we'll see how it goes. I can't predict. Don't be a wuss. Predict, bro. What do you think is going to happen for real?
You can talk all about Quinn. You can talk all about Kingsbury and whoever the heck the defensive coordinator is. I can't even remember his name. You can talk all about Peters. You can talk about all of that. But it all comes down to who the players are. Regardless.
The quarterback is.
And especially the quarterback.
That's what I was going to say for your Kliff Kingsbury part.
So if you tell me.
And the comment that somebody made that Kliff Kingsbury is similar to EB. Let's think about it, guys. EB just really came from Pat Mahomes. Okay? So Pat Mahomes is a freak athlete. Sam Howell is a quarterback. There's a difference. I'm not saying EB wasn't good, but that is a big reason why it probably didn't work because of the quarterback.
Listen, if we come out of all of this and we come out and Caleb Williams is the starting quarterback week 1, right? I'm going to have a different opinion on what the team's record is going to be if the other option I have is if Sam Howell is running it back. Sam Howell does not fit an air raid style offense. He is not the guy who can make a quick decision, who can read a defense and make a quick decision. That's not who Sam Howell is. Sorry. So he's not going to fit in Kliff Kingsbury. But if they decide that they're going to, you hear all these dumb rumors that are out there that they're going to trade back and take Marvin Harrison Jr., which would be the dumbest thing ever to me. And that we're going to run it back. We're going to build the offensive line. And we're going to build this. We're going to run it back with Sam Howell. I'm going to say this team's going to win 5 or 6 games. But if you tell me
they're probably going to win 5 to 6 games.
You're right, and they might. But if you have a quarterback, a real quarterback like Caleb Williams, I'm going to have a little bit more positivity. But I can't do that now. They're not taking Marvin Harrison Jr. I can tell you that right now. And you know how I know this, right? I know this because what's his name? Peters and Quinn, when somebody asked about the talent that's already on this team at that press conference, and they said, look, those defensive line, those defensive tackles we got, right? Those are pretty
studs.
Awesome, right? Mm-hmm. And then he said, what he said is, and those skill guys on the outside, right? We had a darn difficult time trying to figure out how to stop those guys. And he's talking about McLaurin and Dotson and Samuel. That's exactly who he's talking about. So he's telling you that the strength of this team is defensive tackle and wide receiver. So you think they're going to take a wide receiver with the number 2 overall pick?
They didn't bring Kliff Kingsbury in. Yeah, they didn't hire Kliff Kingsbury to draft a wide receiver at number 2.
They're not drafting a wide. They're drafting a quarterback. Period. Because you don't get a shot at saying of getting a number 2 overall pick in forever.
No, it is absolutely the case here. And this is kind of a little bit different here. I'm going to answer first Logan's comment from Facebook just a moment ago. Free agency starts, the legalized tampering period starts March 11th. So that's right around the corner.
corner, bro.
We were going to have this like rebuilding a franchise. We might have to scrap it because we got to get right into free agency videos. So
we're thinking on the same
yeah,
level.
Yeah, it's just
bring that up.
We had this really great built up thing. I made graphics. It's just not going to work because we got to get to free agents because it's literally going to start on the 11th. We're going to have, I think it's the 5th, and I'm going to double check here. So March 5th is when you have to designate for franchise or transition players. So we've got all of that's coming up. We will know in that interim who is available for Washington to go to. But this is what P&W is talking about, right? You're going to have to tweak it to our talent. Any coach is going to know that, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Dan Quinn, Kliff Kingsbury, these people, and even WJ, Whitt Jr. are going to modify their defense, their offense based on the talent they have. Now, you keep saying, Trev, that Washington got Kliff Kingsbury for a reason. Okay. A lot of people are trying to start the Caleb to DC movement. You and I were doing the pray emoji for that just a moment ago when Stoner was saying that Caleb Williams would be the quarterback here. Is there any actual substance to the rumors, or is it more so fans like yourself and me who want Caleb Williams here in DC?
I think there's some substance for sure. I don't think it's a sole Kingsbury, but to tag on to the fact that Dan Quinn is scared of Kliff Kingsbury's quote unquote offenses, and Caleb Williams has happened to be one of the top quarterback in the draft, and we just hired Kliff Kingsbury. You can't say there's no substance there. It just can't. And maybe it's not Caleb Williams, but maybe it's to develop one of these quarterbacks that are picked to go top 3. It might not be Caleb. It could be Jaden, because I'm pretty sure Kliff's doing his homework and studying all 3 to see what he can do to help them, to deliver. But yeah, there's definitely some substance there. I mean, when he was being talked about taking the job with the Raiders, you really didn't hear Caleb going to Vegas. You never heard that. It was just like they would have to draft up and get a quarterback, but you didn't hear it too much. The dots just connect better here. He's from the area, Gonzaga High School. My dog, congrats on Instagram. We all saw that post that he made. I mean, it's a no-brainer. Like Louis Riddick also said, you don't overthink it. It's a no-brainer. You do whatever it takes to get that man in the building, and I think step one of that was getting Kliff Kingsbury. Because Adam Peters already was like, oh, number 2, and Caleb Williams, I want him. How do we, what can we do to help get him that's legal without tampering or doing anything, Oh, I know. What about Kliff Kingsbury? Let's see what he's up to. So definitely some substance there from a fan and from a realistic football standpoint.
Sure. I think there's a fair amount of substance with kind of the rumors that are out there as well. I agree with that, but I don't like the notion of that it's a good fit because he's from this area. I've never liked that whole, he's from this area. And so that it's actually kind of the opposite. I think guys need to get away from their home area because
they love playing home though.
Yeah. I don't know. I think players are better when they're not playing in front of their home people and being around their old neighborhoods or whatever, just kind of being in that whole familiarity with where they are. That's a little too comfortable for me. I like guys who are uncomfortable and in a new spot and not having all of that distractions of being around home. But so I don't know that that's necessarily a factor, but the Kingsbury Caleb factor, coaching him for an entire season, that's a massive, massive advantage to Washington. Whether it's we got to go get Caleb or it's, I worked with him for a year. It'd be better if maybe we grew up or we go and get Jaden Daniels or Drake May or whoever it is. It's going to be a big tell on whether or not Kingsbury
100%
Caleb Williams. If he believes in him, they're going to do whatever it takes to get him, right? They're not going to settle. He's not going to, Kliff Kingsbury's not going to go into Dan Quinn and say, I just worked with Caleb Williams for a year. He's it. Okay. He's different. and then they're going to pass on going to get him and just wait
Right.
for Drake May. It's not going to happen. They're
Nah.
not going to do that. But if they do end up not going up to get Caleb, then that's probably all you need to know about Caleb as well. Because if Kliff Kingsbury is everything everybody thinks he is, then and he says Caleb's not the guy, well, guess what? Caleb's probably not the guy then. But
there might be some trust in Adam Peters, who has trust in the scouting department, which is a holdover from last year. A big thing there, and this is very common with people because people are like, how are you going to trust these scouting departments when they pick the players they pick? The people scouting don't pick the players, okay? We got rid of or changed over a lot of the people who pick the players. The scouting department's just fine, plus that will happen after the draft. You got to use their information up to the draft. But if that scouting department, if Adam Peters are like, hey, here's, Jalen Daniels or Drake May or the other two quarterbacks mentioned at number 2, Kliff Kingsbury might have to, go with them, even though he's shouting from the rooftops like, hey, go Caleb Williams. He's not picking the player. Now, he is absolutely, Adam Peters is picking Kliff Kingsbury's brain on Caleb Williams to get some more of that insight there. But let's not forget about the fact that Kliff Kingsbury actually has some ties to the UNC side as well, and so do some of the other staff. So I don't think it's just his hook, line, and sinker. In fact, I argue there's zero substance to the Kliff Kingsbury is a hire to bring on Caleb Williams. I think that is all of the Ben Johnson to Washington type smoke that we saw over the last month. And that is what people are going to talk about, because you do hire the guy who was an offensive assistant over in USC. You got a top 2 pick. You got to figure that's where people's minds go, but that's not necessarily the reason why Washington brings him on. And I don't think that they make that move for number 1, because that's what I think it's going to take to pick up Caleb Williams.
It is.
I don't think they necessarily make that move because this team does have more. But I mean, a QB can fix a lot of the worries. They're going to go QB number 2. I'd be very surprised if they didn't. But this it's going to be interesting. And we're going to break down Caleb Williams film, and we're going to break down Drake May film, and we're going to bring down Daniels film. And somebody mentioned JJ McCarthy in the 3rd, and no thanks at all. Period. But if we need to, we can break down film for him as well. But that's a big no from Nathan.
Yeah, give me Michael Penix Jr. before that.
Yeah, so, I think in terms of kind of getting back a little bit into Caleb Williams, but if Chicago doesn't want Caleb Williams for whatever reason, or they're going to stick with Justin Fields, whatever they decide to do, if Washington doesn't go up to 1, somebody else is going to go up to 1 to get Caleb Williams. Caleb Williams is going number 1. It might be New England. New England's at 3, right?
Yeah.
I believe, right? 3. They're going to jump over, and they're going to take Caleb. Somebody's going to go get Caleb Williams. So if Washington wants Caleb Williams, they can't sit back and think that Chicago is just going to take Marvin Harrison Jr. number 1 overall. Ain't happening. So if they want it, they're going to have to go get him. They can't sit and wait for him at 2. So, and I hope they will. And we haven't done the film, and Nate said we're going to do film on these guys. From everything that I've looked at, and I haven't gone deep into the film, we're overthinking Caleb Williams.
Yeah,
he is definitely him.
He's the guy.
I've known it since he was wearing a Sooner jersey. Okay,
yeah.
I've known how legit he is when he was there.
He is legit.
Yeah,
anybody who passes on him, they're big dummies. If Chicago trades out of that,
Chicago is a big dummy. Okay, Chicago is a big dummy. Caleb has sniffed too many. Okay, yeah, Mike, sure. This is the comment I meant to hit here. Roger, JJ is better than people think. Roger, I mean this in all jest, but if you like JJ McCarthy, that's all the more reason why I don't want him here, because if he's good, if you like him because he's going to hand the ball off, which is what an offensive genius in Harbaugh got it right that time, gents. Had him do. He did not trust him to pass the ball.
What was that? Was that the Ohio State game where they threw the ball
Yeah.
like 6 times or something
Yeah.
like that because they didn't trust him.
Even on their way to the championship game, they
Yeah.
weren't trusting him to throw the ball. And this
Yeah,
is
yeah.
again a guy who, like, I know
College
he backed him up 100%. They're not picking him. It's just
Yeah.
like that.
No.
That's a guy that I want to stay far, far away from. So, but
It's the same thing with Sam Howell. When he fell all the way to the 5th round, and we're like, oh, we got ourselves a bargain.
I really thought it was a good. I thought it was a great draft pick. First pick in the 5th round. I was ecstatic. I was just like, hey, this is a good QB. Not a QB1 at the time. I still thought that this was a project QB that I thought had starter ability, but was going to be a backup QB.
You know what's funny is you went from liking the pick to hating what he ended up becoming, and I was the guy who hated the pick and ended up liking what he was becoming, and then of course hating what he ended up being.
He's been a bad taste.
But 5th round quarterbacks.
Quarterback. I'm not ready to see Drake May and Burgundy Gold. No, thank you.
So Bosky's kind of bringing that up as well. And so we're going to stay on the QB talk because it really, like, we know that this roster has holes. I've declared this. Not too many people answered my question on how far we're going to go in season 1 and season 3, at least not in the comment section. So we moved on here. Bosky, outside of Caleb, no other QB is worth a second overall pick. Hard disagree.
Yeah.
And that's not to say I'm a very much a best player available person. Okay. The problem is most QB needy teams and most QBs are tiers ahead strictly because of the position.
The value.
The value is there. So while Drake May and Jaden Daniels are in my opinion underneath Marvin Harrison Jr., who in my opinion goes 1-2, Caleb Williams, Marvin Harrison Jr., and then everybody else. Okay. So those are your top 2 on my board right now, but you don't pick Marvin Harrison Jr. if you don't got a QB.
That's right.
You can take Marvin Harrison Jr. if you don't have a left tackle, if you don't have an edge, you don't have anything else, which those are the 2 other positions. Those are the 2 other positions that you would go after.
Yeah.
But because he is literally just the best player available after Caleb Williams. But if you don't have a QB, you can't do that. And so there are QBs that are going to go higher than you would think, namely because Washington, New England, Atlanta, like these are teams that are all picking up high and they know that they need a QB and they're going to take a swing on somebody who has first round talent, because that's what you're looking for. Ignore where they fall on the big board. If they're a first round talent, you're not going to have to wait on that one. Mike hitting us up with that QB question with a $10 donation here.
Appreciate you, Mike.
Appreciate you. Who is the starting QB game 1 2024 season? Not who is going to be the eventual starter. Trev, we'll go with you first because I want to pause so much on Stoner after he bogarted half of the show.
Jaden Daniels.
Jaden Daniels, starter QB1. All right. Stoner?
Okay. Yeah. I am a believer in the Kliff Kingsbury, Caleb Williams marriage, and so Caleb Williams will be the starter week 1 of the 2024 season.
From your mouth to God's ears, as we'll say here in the Bible Belt. Absolutely. I would love that. I don't think that's going to happen. Jaden Daniels is somebody who I'm starting to get really excited about, but I'm trying to pump my brakes on that. I will go just to be different here. Drake May is going to be QB1 to start the season. It's going to be one of those 3.
Yeah, they're not going to draft a guy at 2 or 1 or 3 or whatever they end up drafting a quarterback, and they're not just going to have him sit on the bench while Jacoby Brissett starts for 4 or 5 games.
Who, by the way, was on a 1-year deal. So a lot of people think Brissett, he would have to re-sign here, and I just don't see that being the case. We got Tommy with a Sam Howell. If you heard what Dan Quinn, like Adam Peters was asked the QB question and he went, nope, and sidestepped that one like no joke. Dan Quinn was,
they're ready.
Yeah, Dan Quinn was asked the question and he was just like, oh, Sam was great, beat us his first game. We had trouble with him. You didn't have trouble with him this season. What are you blowing smoke up our rear? Like that, he gave the things that you expect the head coach to give one of his young players and be like, yeah, no, he's got talent. He can throw the ball around. We're picking a QB. It ain't going to be Sam Howell. As much as people want that to happen, it's just not going to be the case.
Is Sam Howell going to be on the roster?
Yes, 100%.
Assuming they take a quarterback with that.
Why would he not?
Just cut him.
I don't understand this. People are like, well, then trade him if you're not going to go. Why?
Nobody's going to take him.
He's got value still.
Okay.
He's still shown that he can win football games. He's still shown that he can throw it. There's still value there. He's just not QB1 value right now. Maybe 3 years from now when he goes to another team, they can start him.
He'll be in year 3 of his 4-year deal this year, right?
Yep.
So he's got at least 2 years, at least under contract. And he's cheap, right? He makes less than $1 million a year as a QB2. I'd be comfortable with Sam Howell as QB2 for $850,000 salary cap hit or whatever it will be. Heck yeah.
Yeah. All right. Last question, unless we get another good one, but Gus got this one in, and I think it was this fantastic here. Okay. Trade down. Remember, roster has a lot of holes to fill. So you need to fill these with talented players. So he's saying trade down. Why do we have to make this season about the QB? Trev is already like dumbfounded here that this is even a thought.
Because since 2012 RG3, we've needed a quarterback. We haven't been successful without a quarterback. The teams that are in the Super Bowl, Brock Purdy or not, he's a quarterback. We need a quarterback. I know we have other holes to fill, but if we fill those holes and we have somebody who can't run the offense, those holes are going to be irrelevant. They're going to be overlooked because we can't get down the field and score points. We need a quarterback. Ron Rivera said it. Quarterback. There's a Netflix special on TV. Quarterback. Like, I'm sorry, Gus. I love your support and all your questions, but this one's just like, yeah, it's about the quarterback. Nobody. It's just I don't know what else to
every
say.
Season's
it's
about
the quarterback. Yeah, it's a quarterback-driven league. We didn't get Kliff Kingsbury here to draft a defensive lineman at number 2 or a linebacker at number 2. We've already been through that. We need somebody to draft a quarterback, develop a quarterback. I'm tired of going through Garrett Gilbert, Taylor Heineke, Case Keenum, Alex Smith. He was good, but he broke his leg. I'm tired of get a quarterback and then fill the rest in.
And for
get
sure,
a quarterback it makes it a destination for people to come want to play for that quarterback.
And I totally agree with all that. And just to add on to that is they have the number 2 overall pick. Do you know how hard it is to only win 4 games in a season? Do you know how hard it is to lose 8 games in a row like Washington did? It's very difficult. Look at what the Giants did with a third or fourth string quarterback in Danny DeVito's nephew or whatever. I forgot his relation, whatever. And they won out and won 6 or 7 games. It's very, very hard to be a 2, 3, 4 win team. You don't get the number 2 overall pick very often. And when you do, you have to take advantage of the opportunity to draft a quarterback. You can't just say, well, we'll build around and try and figure out quarterback next year. Because the way everything plays out, you never know what that's going to be. Who are the quarterbacks that are going to be available? Where are you picking? What was your record? What did this certain quarterback do for you? Who's the free agents? You can't just kind of push it down the road. Like people wanted to tank for Tua. Then people wanted to tank for Caleb. And now here we are with a chance to get Caleb. and we're saying, oh, let's just push it down the road again.
Yeah, no.
You got the number 2 overall pick, and so you have to take advantage of it.
To add on to this, because you absolutely have to take QB. We talked about, Gus is asking the question, why does a season have to be about the QB? Because last season was about the QB. You did not start Sam Howell 17 games finding out that he's not the guy to then not take a guy at number 2.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the first thing. Okay, you literally trotted out the first year starter, second year pro to try to see if he could be the future of this franchise. And there's plenty of excuses people want to make for him. The fact of the matter is, Sam Howell is not the QB of the future for the Washington Commanders. It's just as simple as that. We've seen the tape. We have 18 games now that show us who he is, and he is a quality backup in the NFL. I wanted him to be more. He wasn't more. Okay. So that was what last season was that led us to this point. All right. So now we're in position to take one of the top talents. We don't know if they're going to be the franchise quarterback, but they sure as heck have a better shot at it than the guy who we played last season. Okay. So Washington has to. Another reason you don't trade back is I know we have roster holes to fill. Plenty of, but the thing is you trade back when you don't have picks. If Washington were trade up to 1 for Caleb Williams, and then next year needs to fill roster spots, then they can trade back next year, not with a first, because they're likely going to lose that in the trade to Caleb Williams. But they're like trade back in the second, so that way they can get a couple more picks to be able to try to fill in, try to pick out some guys. Okay. So that's what they'll have to do if they trade up, because they don't have the draft picks. You have 5 draft picks in the top 100. You go 6 more spots and you get another one. So 6 picks within the top 110. Okay. Players in this NFL draft are going to be in burgundy and gold. We don't have to trade back for more picks. Okay. We're not drafting at 16 where maybe, hey, we can get 2 guys in around a first round or early second round. We're at number 2 with a need at QB and players who are worth, in my opinion, that second overall pick. So you don't have to, you have to draft a QB. Yeah, Trev's going to head out, but I think it's actually a perfect time for everybody. We appreciate everybody jumping on here with us on Ref the District. We stream live every Wednesday here on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. We appreciate you jumping on live and joining the conversation with us here on Ref the District. It's backwards hat day, even with the buckle hat and smoking a stogie with Stoner. I'm Nathan Perry. That's Trev. We've got content coming to you. Like I said, we're going to be breaking down some tape and talking about the free agents. So stay with us on the channel. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe button so you get all the good content. But until next time,
# Stoner was right.
Be a fan.